Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lynn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lynn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lynn Smith. And today, listeners, I've got a lovely, very, very kind-hearted woman who has been through some really shocking trauma in her past. And I've wanted to invite her on. Her name is September Burton. And she's got a very profound story to share, which I think some of you will be able to relate to and hopefully gain a lot of insights and wisdoms around how to heal after domestic violence. So welcome to you, September.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, September, I think it would be appropriate, probably on the back of the headline being Healing After Domestic Violence, to give us a little bit of insight around you and your personal story, if you're happy to share it.
So my story is pretty intense domestic violence. It was more emotional and psychological abuse. There was some physical abuse, but it was somebody who, at the end of the relationship, decided to start recording me all day, every day for a 7-month period. And then, I tried to get a protective order because he started stalking and coming into the home covertly and hacking into the home security system and doing all kinds of crazy things like that. So I sought a protective order. And what was interesting to me about the recordings was I didn't know that they were a thing yet. He did it for emotional blackmail, essentially, to keep me, in my place and be able to keep control over me and things like that. And so he's really, really good. He's very, very sneaky and very, very covert. And so he did this. And then when we were in the protective order hearing, he was talking about how he had recorded me all day, every day for 7 months. And like his chest was actually puffed out as he was saying this. He was so proud of himself. And I just thought, how can anybody look at this situation and not think that there's something off with a person who would record somebody else in their home for a 7-month period? And but he's an attorney, and so he knew exactly what the judge wanted to hear, and so he made up some creative, fun stories and got out of everything. And so I'm actually still living in hiding at this point. I haven't been able to go back safely to my home. So I left where we were, and I just kind of left in the middle of the night kind of thing, left absolutely everything behind, got on an airplane, went to Hawaii, called the women's shelter as soon as I got there and stayed in the women's shelter for a couple of months. And then he found me there. And so I actually left Hawaii, went to Jamaica for a little while, spent a few weeks in Jamaica. And that was a big part of my healing journey. And that's kind of what I think is the cool part of the story. Like, yeah, there's the abuse and there's all of this craziness that happened. And yes, I'm still living in hiding, but it's the healing journey that, living in the women's shelter, that was a beautiful, beautiful experience for me, because I got to experience what happens when women heal together. And there's this magical, amazing bond that happens between women when they're healing together. And so, being in the shelter with these other women who had just experienced some traumatic events as well was incredibly powerful. And then, like I said, I went to Jamaica, and I think that going to Jamaica, I didn't know why I was there. And I stayed in an Airbnb when I got there. And I told the guy who owned the place the night that I got there, I said, I don't actually know why I'm here right now. Well, come to find out, he was, in his day, he was a very famous poet. And so I have become a poet, actually. And I've started writing, and I've gotten very, very into reading poetry. And now I've even started writing my own poetry, which is a huge part of my healing journey. So I guess that's the beauty of it, is learning more about me so that I never get myself into another situation like this.
How long were you actually together in total? Were you actually living together, or or separately whilst you was in this relationship? What was the circumstances of it?
Yeah, so we were together for about 5 years. We actually have 3 children together. We have 3 daughters, a set of twins in there, 2-year-old twins. So yeah, it was basically a marital relationship.
Right. Okay. So did the children go with you, or what happened regarding your kids in this situation?
No, I'm from the States, and in the States, if there's anything in the court system regarding custody over the children, then if either parent takes them over state lines, it's considered kidnapping. And so if I had brought them with me, I would be in prison right now for kidnapping.
So where are your children? Are they with him or his family or your family? What happened there?
They're with him, and I don't know what it's like in the UK or anywhere else in the world really, but I know that in the States there's a huge problem in the family court system, and there was a lot of cheating, there was a lot of lying, there was a lot of favoritism, there was a lot of corruption going on, and so I ended up losing custody of those kids. So at this point, I don't have custody of my children.
Oh, bless you.
Yeah.
So how old are they now?
The twins are 2, and then my other baby girl she's about to turn 4.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, because I know how devastating that can be, to lose access to your children. That's really, really hard and really tough. So, my heartfelt sympathy around that situation. So when he was recording you, at what point did you become aware? Were you ever aware, or did it become apparent, or literally in the court that he was more or less bragging about it?
Yeah, it was in the courtroom when I found out. He was using, some of the recordings as evidence. And so he said that he started doing it to show me that I was gaslighting him. And so his intention with starting to do it was to let me listen to myself so that I could see how I was gaslighting him. In reality, he was the one doing the gaslighting. And I just think he's very smart. He's a very, very intelligent person. And so I think that he made a few recordings and then listened to them, realized that he was the one doing the gaslighting and not me. And so he never, approached me with them or had me listen to them, because he could see that he was the one doing it and not me.
So just explain to listeners who aren't familiar with the term gaslighting what that actually means.
Gaslighting is anything that causes you to question your reality. So lies are a form of gaslighting. One example of gaslighting would be the girls came back to me having had their hair trimmed at one point, and I sent an email to him and his mom and his dad and his stepmom, and I just said, can you guys please just talk to me before you cut my kids' hair? And his mom's response was, well, it didn't look to me like they even had haircuts. That would be gaslighting, because that causes me to question, well, did they have haircuts? You know what I mean? So that's gaslighting.
Okay, I just wanted to clear that up, because I know that probably there are some listeners that are thinking, well, what's gaslighting? What is it? And can I relate to that or not in my own situation, probably?
Yeah. And
so was any of the recordings actually played as evidence at the court to try?
They were, because I ended up, I'm a pretty stable person, but I did lose it at the end, at the very, very end of the relationship. There were times where I just would start screaming, and I slapped him across the face. And of course, there's some physical abuse on his side. And so he played those recordings and just the little snippets that were right for him, which isn't actually supposed to be allowed in a courtroom. If you're playing a recording, you're supposed to play the entire thing. But that was part of the cheating, was that he got away with just doing the little snippets that made me sound bad and left out, anything that makes him sound bad. But then I went through and I transcribed the recordings, and, yes, I'm crying and I'm screaming and I'm very upset and I sound horrible. But what's really being said is, why can't you just be nice to me? And then he comes back with, I've tried that and it doesn't work. And then, I come back with, I'm sorry, I just don't want you to be mean to me anymore. So there's obvious, psychological and emotional abuse there, but when you just listen to it, like, I sound like the one who's crazy. And he did that very intentionally. He knew exactly what he was doing. So
it's interesting that he was able to get away with editing it so that the full context or the full picture of the scenario wasn't apparent.
Yeah, it's the whole court case is pretty bad. If at some point I'll have a legal analyst go over it and actually review everything that happened, because it's so obvious. I mean, it's bad. I don't know what more to say about it than that.
Because you could question the whole system in that regards, and there's obviously fault not just with him, but that actual whole scenario, and who's responsible for allowing that situation to be played out the way it was.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when you went to the first place, which was Hawaii, how did he manage to track you down there, do you think?
So I found out he sent me a package and tracked it, and I didn't know this when I didn't know what was going to happen, but it's kind of funny that I had ordered something off of Etsy.com, and I had forgotten to update my address to the Hawaii address, and so she had sent it to my previous address on the mainland, and then she sent me an email, and she said, I'm really sorry that this package is late. I don't understand why it's taking so long. And then a few days later, it arrived, and she sent me another message saying, oh, I'm so happy. I see that it made it to Hawaii. And I thought, wait a second, how does she know that it made it to Hawaii? So I got on the post office website and I looked, and when something is forwarded like that to with a tracked package, it does show the city of the final destination. And so that's what they did, was they sent me a package through the post office that was addressed to my previous address, but then it was forwarded by the post office so that they could see, the city that it was forwarded to.
So did he actually make face-to-face contact with you when you was in Hawaii? How did that show itself?
No, he didn't. That was at the heart or the peak of COVID. When everything, we were all still figuring out how to re-navigate life, and everything was just on complete lockdown at that time. So when that first happened, I wasn't concerned. I didn't run right away. It was actually still a few months that I stayed in Hawaii before I ran again. Just because I knew, there's no realistic way that he was going to come there and do anything. And Hawaii was very, very big on the 14-day quarantine for anybody that came onto the island. And even with inter-island travel, they were very, very strict about the 14-day quarantines.
Right. Okay. So what was the thing that actually made you then want to move away from Hawaii to Jamaica? Obviously something triggered you to want to think, I'm not going to be safe staying here anymore.
They started to lift some of the COVID restrictions. And as I was watching the whole situation unravel, I knew that as soon as COVID restrictions were lifted, I was going to be gone. And so as soon as they lifted inter-island quarantine rules, which I actually think was a mistake, but as soon as they lifted the inter-island quarantine, I was like, okay, that's close enough for me. That's enough of a ease up on the restrictions that I'm going to go.
And what was it when you first, I suppose, made that decision and had, I suppose, a bit more of a light bulb moment that actually made you finally escape that situation and realize, for my own safety, my own health, my own well-being, I need to go?
Do you mean getting out of the relationship or leaving the city for safety?
Well, both really, yeah.
So getting out of the relationship, I actually didn't. He left. I was very, very caught up in the belief that, you stay together for the kids and you can work it out and you get therapy and, a therapist is going to solve all of your problems and everything's going to be fine. I didn't realize how severely traumatized I was. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD as a result of all of the abuse over the years and trauma, but I didn't realize how severely traumatized I was. And he, at the very end of the relationship, right before he left, he looked at me one day and he said, "You need therapy," which was the best thing that he could have said, because I thought, okay, I'm going to go find a therapist. And so I did. And she actually turned out to be an angel. And I'm actually still working with her. And she was the first one to say, what she said to me was, have you ever heard of the narcissist empath dance? And I was like, nope, not familiar with that at all. And so then we started talking about that. And then I started reading books on narcissism, and I started understanding what it was that I was actually dealing with. And then once I started to understand and see, what had actually happened and what was unfolding. And the thing about them is that they're very predictable. Once you start to understand, they become extremely predictable. And so I knew exactly what his next moves were going to be and things like that. And so, he had been covertly entering the home. He had lied blatantly in the courts. He made up this story. There was a chandelier that had obviously been messed with once when I took the kids camping over the summer. So he had been in the home while we were camping. And I brought pictures of that into the courtroom as evidence. And he said that he and the kids would use that glass chandelier as a target for Nerf guns. And the judge bought it, which is mind-blowing. So he, when I saw that he was willing to make up these creative stories and he was not stopping, there were protective orders against him and he was continuing to stalk even with protective orders. Then I learned about something called the Mosaic Threat Assessment, which is, if you just Google Mosaic Threat Assessment, you can find it. And it's a threat assessment that they use to basically assess how much danger are you really in. And when I went through and did it, he scored a 9 out of 10. And when I saw that, I was like, I have got to get out of here because my kids are better off with a mom who's far away than they are with a mom who's dead. And so, I still fully believe that if I hadn't left when I did, I would not be around to be telling this story right now. So that was really the final straw. I had seen a friend of mine less than a week before I left, and she looked at me and, everybody could see that I was not okay. And she looked at me and she said, if you need help, I have connections. Just all you have to do is call. I'm just a phone call away. And I said, okay, thank you, whatever. And I processed that for a couple of days. And then I did that Mosaic Threat Assessment. And as soon as I saw that, I called her and I said, I need help and I need help now. And so she got me a plane ticket. She put me on the plane and she said, as soon as you get there, just call the women's shelter. And so that was kind of how I got out.
Wow, excellent. So again, for the benefit of listeners that aren't necessarily aware of what the term narcissism actually means, how would you describe or explain that to somebody?
So the biggest factor with narcissism is that it's somebody who lacks empathy. And empathy is, what creates human connection. Without empathy, there really is no human connection. And so with a narcissist, what you have is somebody who wears a mask, and somebody who masquerades around as like this perfect, wonderful human being. And this narcissist is really, really, really good at fooling people and making everybody think that he's just this wonderful person and he's a victim. And but if you see behind the mask, there's nothing there. There's no depth to who they are. There's no substance to who they are. They sort of take on the beliefs of whoever they're around at the time, and so they're good at fooling you. They do the love bombing in the beginning of the relationship, and then they start to withdraw their love. In my case, his love bombing was all about verbal affirmations and verbal reinforcements and things. And so he would tell me, you're so amazing, you're so intelligent, you're so wonderful. And, he was always telling me all of these things, building me up. And then when he flipped, it was, you're worthless, you're nothing, you're pathetic, those kinds of things. And so that's what they do, is they love bomb you, and then you become actually addicted to them. It's actually an addiction. And then of course they discard you at the end. So basically just throw you away.
And is this common? I mean, I know this is common from, the unhealthy masculine man perspective to be narcissistic, but is this common in reverse as well, about the narcissistic women?
I think there's some narcissistic women for sure. It's more common for women who develop a personality disorder to be borderline, or there's another one that starts with an H. I can't think of the name of it right now. But those are more common for women, and narcissism is more common for men. But, it can go both ways. Men can be borderline, women can be narcissists. it just depends on how, I guess, your trauma and how you process things.
And do you fear for your daughters? I mean, is he he might not have been a good partner or boyfriend, but was he a good father to your children?
He's a good father right now. Yes, he's a good father because they're dolls to him. They get him a lot of attention. They feed his ego. So as long as they're essentially toys to him. And so as long as that's the case, he's a great father. He plays with them. He reads them stories. He kisses them goodnight. He does all of the good father things. The challenge is going to be that these are all girls, and he's not very into like feminism and strong women and things like that. And so when they start to grow up and they start to have opinions of their own, that's when things are going to get rough. So I'm hoping, more than hoping, I'm focused on getting things taken care of and turning the situation around before they get much older.
Excellent. So what is your focus immediately then to ensure that happens sooner rather than later?
Right this minute, my focus is on healing myself. It's on, staying safe for one thing. So I'm still in hiding. And then healing myself, because I really believe that the more that a parent heals themselves, the easier it is for the child. Even though I'm not physically present with them, there's a bond there's an unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. And so the more that I heal, the more it's going to lift them up and benefit them. And then as soon as we're reunited, it makes me a better mom, even than I was before, the more that I focus on just healing myself. So that's where I'm at right now. And, what the next move is going to be, we'll figure that out as we go along.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think you're doing exactly the right thing, because without healing your wounds, you can't, like you say, be as good a parent as what you need to be to those girls once the time comes and you're united and reconciled. So I 100% believe you're actually doing exactly the right thing in terms of focusing on yourself right now.
Yeah. What's interesting is I think it was the last episode that you did, or at least the last one that was published. You talked about the toxic feminine too, and how, there's that toxic masculinity that we talk about, but then there's the other side. And that's kind of the harsh reality that I've had to face is, why did I do this? Why did I make this choice? How did I get myself into this situation? And that's really what I'm focused on as far as my healing process is. Like, I didn't have enough self-love. I wasn't nurtured enough by my mother as a child. I didn't get my needs met. And so I turned to men, and I thought that, they were going to be my knights in shining armor, and they were going to be my heroes and save me from all of my woes, kind of a thing. So I think that, for me, it's been a lot about getting into feminism and, the healthy feminism, not the angry feminism. Getting into feminism and reading poetry and becoming a poet myself, really writing my own poetry. So there's that, I guess the point was there's that toxic feminine side too. And that's where I was. And that's what I'm seeking to get out of now.
Excellent. What I'd also like to pick up on what you just said is how healing the poetry that you've been for you, because I think a lot of the clients that I've worked with find that some sort of activity, be it arts or crafts or certainly journaling or writing stuff like poetry, has been very therapeutic in their healing journey.
Absolutely. I think it's about creativity. I think it's about unlocking that creative side of your brain because, in modern day society, we're so focused on the math and the science, and that's fantastic. And we need that. But we're losing touch with the creativity of being a human being. And when you look at nature, like it's pure creativity. Yeah, it's science. Yes, there's biology and botany and all of that. But it's pure beauty and creativity. Without the creativity, it wouldn't be beautiful.
Yeah, and I've certainly noticed that with, and certainly obviously looking into that and guiding women down that path that I work with around, what is it that you'd like to get involved in that you either used to do or would like to do in terms of creative stuff, whether it's knitting, sewing, writing, painting, drawing, like you said, it's any sort of creativity, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's so, for me, the poetry, what it does for me is, there was a moment where I lied to cover up bruises, and that was like one of my all-time low moments. And I turned that into a poem, and it feels like now that's not in me anymore. It's on the paper. It's taken care of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you've unloaded it. And I actually give women sometimes that as an exercise to do. You write down your feelings, get everything out on the paper. And then, as a sort of act of letting it all go, either burn it or destroy it, and know that's no longer going to affect you because you've got rid of it. And
Yeah.
you'll feel liberated on the back of unloading yourself through that medium.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so healing.
I certainly find it also a good exercise to get women to write a letter to their partner as well. Not meaning to send it. It's one of those letters that you don't mean to send, but it is, again, is getting all their feelings out around that particular person as well.
Yeah, I did that for a while. I have a folder on my computer full of letters to him. And that was really helpful for me. That was while I was figuring out what narcissism was. So I was still kind of almost in that pleading for the relationship to right itself phase until, that was before I figured out what I was actually dealing with, and that there's no way that this relationship is going to right itself. But it was healing, and I still have them. They're still there.
And do you think you'll keep them there, or do you think you'll delete them, or do you think you'll ever print those? What's your reason for still having them there?
I don't think that I'm done processing it yet. So I think they're still there waiting to be fully processed. And what I do with them when I finish processing, I don't know. I may print them up and burn them. I think that burning is very, very, that's really therapeutic. So we'll see.
Yeah, it certainly sends a message out to the universe and for our lives of the future to say that I'm done with this, doesn't it? Sort of having some sort of what I call letting go ceremony like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you know that you're speaking to some people or some women in particular in the audience that are maybe sort of recognizing themselves in your story, what would be your advice to them right now, September?
I would say get some good books. The book Women Who Run with the Wolves is such a powerful, healing book. The woman who wrote it, Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, she has a bunch of other books on Audible as well. If you're hearing yourself in my story, you're probably an unmothered, child. You probably didn't get enough nurturing. That's not to say that your mother was horrible or anything, but you just didn't fully get your needs met. Warming the Stone Child is a powerful, powerful book that talks about, people like me who just simply didn't get what we needed as a child, and how you can go back now and take care of that and fill that piece of you and warm your own self up. And so it really, at the end of the day, it all goes back to self-love. We talk about this so much, but it's so true. It all goes back to self-love.
What was the first step that you took, do you think? And you can remember a particular exercise you did towards recognizing you didn't have that for yourself, firstly, and secondly, to actually addressing that?
I think getting a therapist. And, I was lucky enough to find a really, really good therapist. And there are amazing therapists out there. There's bad therapists out there, of course, as in any profession. But I was lucky enough to find an amazing person to work with. And she really has just been a rock for me. And I'll continue working with her for probably a very, very long time. But just having that support and having somebody who understands from a different perspective and from a more educated perspective has been incredibly helpful for me. So she has guided me along with all of the, some of the books that I read and some of the practices that I've started up and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable advice. Any sort of therapist or coach, mentor, certainly I think a lot of women are drawn to me because they hear their own story and my story and know that I can absolutely empathize with where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of, other coaching modalities as well. I do a lot of healing things. So it's definitely not just the therapist, but I think that they all complement each other. And when your focus is on healing yourself and on getting better and on being the best that you can be, then you can combine all of these different things, and it just all comes full circle, and it all sort of wraps you in this circle of warmth. And at the end of the day, that's really what you need.
Excellent. So on that note then, September, what is the best contact information you can share with our audience should anybody want to reach out to you or be inspired to reach out to you?
Yeah, I guess one of the advantages of being me is that I have a very unique name. My first name is September. So I'm September Burton, and across any social media platform or any, my website is septemberburton.com. So you can that's how you find me, September Burton.
September Burton with a B-U, as in Richard Burton, the famous actor.
Yes, and my father is Richard Burton, but not that Richard Burton.
You know what? I love that love story between Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, because Elizabeth Taylor's got the same birthday as me, albeit, many years older. But yeah.
Yeah, that's fun.
That's one of my claims to fame, having the same birthday. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your excellent story, very inspirational story, and such beautiful words of wisdom and guidance and advice there, September.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's an honor, and it's still part of my healing journey to share my story. So it's definitely a privilege. Thank you.
So finally, with wrapping up then, listeners, I always like to end with true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lynn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lynn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lynn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.